The dress had been hanging on my closet door since Tuesday. It was the navy one, the one my husband bought me for our 35th anniversary, the one I had only worn twice because it felt too good to waste on ordinary days. I'd had it pressed. I had my hair done at Maureen's place on Thursday morning, even though I usually only go on Saturdays. I had painted my nails for the first time in 2 years. Pale pink. My daughter had said it was her favorite color on me, back when she still said things like that. I was 63 years old, and I was standing in my bathroom mirror telling myself that today was a good day. That today, whatever had happened between us, whatever had grown cold and distant in the last 4 years, today my daughter was finishing her MBA at Dalhousie, and I was her mother. And I was going to be proud of her out loud, in public, in that navy dress. My neighbor Gwen had offered to drive. She's been next door for 22 years. We shoveled each other's driveways, watched each other's cats, held each other's hands through things that don't have names. She knew about the tension with my daughter. She knew about the fiancé. She didn't push. She showed up that morning with a thermos of coffee and said, "I'll drive. You look too nice to be concentrating on the highway." We arrived at the venue 40 minutes early because I'd miscalculated the traffic. Or rather, I'd worried myself into leaving far too soon. The university hall smelled like floor polish and old wood, and that particular kind of nervous energy that comes before things that matter. I found the row where I was supposed to sit. I set my handbag down. I read the program 3 times without taking in a single word, and then Gwen touched my arm. "Don't look now," she said quietly, "but your daughter's fiancé just walked in with a woman who is definitely not his mother." I looked. Of course I looked. He was standing near the far entrance in a gray suit, and the woman beside him was perhaps 40, well-dressed, with her hand resting on his arm in a way that was not casual. Not the way you touch a colleague. Not the way you touch a colleague. Not the way you touch a friend. I watched them for a moment. He hadn't seen me. He was laughing at something she said, and he put his hand briefly over hers before they separated and he came to find his seat. I told myself I had imagined it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself 100 things in the space of about 45 seconds, and then I focused on the stage, and I clapped when everyone clapped, and I cried a little when my daughter crossed to receive her diploma, because whatever else was true, she had worked hard for that. The reception was in the hall adjacent to the main auditorium. Round tables, white linens, those small potted flower arrangements that universities always use. My daughter found me near the windows. She was in her gown still, hood over one shoulder, face flushed and bright in the way I hadn't seen in years. For a moment she looked exactly like herself at 22, the first time she graduated, and I felt something in my chest crack open a little. We hugged. It wasn't awkward. That surprised me. Her fiancé. I'll call him what he was to me then, which was simply her fiancé, came and shook my hand with both of his and said all the right things. He had always been good at saying the right things. My daughter had met him 3 years ago in Toronto, where she'd been working before going back to school, and she'd brought him home at Christmas looking at him the way I recognized from my own younger self. That particular softness around the eyes. I had reservations I never said aloud. I don't know now if I should have. Gwen sat at the next table, giving me small, encouraging looks over her water glass. I ate the salmon. I made conversation with another parent on my left, whose son had graduated in the same cohort. I watched my daughter laugh across the table, and I thought, this is fine. We are fine. And then I dropped my phone under the table. It slid right off my lap during the applause for the dean's remarks, and it skidded under the tablecloth and came to rest somewhere near the base of the table behind ours. I bent down to retrieve it, and I was half under the table, which I realize sounds undignified for a 63-year-old woman in a Navy anniversary dress when I heard them. My daughter's voice. Her fiancé's voice. The table directly behind mine, separated by perhaps 2 feet of air and a white linen tablecloth. She looked good today, he was saying. Healthy. She always looks good. my daughter said. That's the thing about her. She's one of those people who just doesn't seem to age. That's what I mean, though. She could still be doing this for another 30 years. A pause. The kind of pause that has weight. She won't be, my daughter said, quieter now. She'll want to retire eventually. And when she sells the house in Wolfville, that house is worth what, 650, 700, closer to 7. The market's been, and the RSP. Another pause. I had found my phone. I was not moving. I don't know the exact number, my daughter said, but she always said she'd been putting in the maximum since she was 30, so it's substantial, and the TFSA. It wasn't a question, the way he said it, it wasn't a question. Yes, my daughter said, and the TFSA. I pressed my palm flat against the floor. The carpet was rough. I focused on that. The thing is, he said, and his voice dropped lower, the timing matters. If we get married before she updates the beneficiary designations. She already told me I'm primary beneficiary on the RRSP. Right, but does she know that transfers to a spouse automatically at death? If you're named and you're not a spouse, I know how it works. I'm just saying, we should move the wedding date up. Before she does anything formal with an estate lawyer, people her age start thinking about these things, and then they start reorganizing. She doesn't have a will. I told you that. You're sure? I asked her directly. 2 months ago. She said she'd been meaning to. I stayed very still. The salmon I'd eaten sat heavy somewhere between my ribs. Then we have time, he said. And then he said something so low I couldn't catch it, and my daughter laughed, a small, private laugh that I had never heard from her before. And I thought, I do not know this person. I have been thinking I know her, and I do not. I retrieved my phone. I straightened up. I sat back in my chair and I looked at the white tablecloth and I thought, quite clearly, do not cry here. Do not let your face show anything. You are 63 years old and you have survived harder things than this, and you will not cry in this room. Gwen looked at me from the next table. She could tell. She has known me for 22 years. She made a small motion with her head, later. We will talk later. I nodded once and picked up my water glass. We did not talk until we were in the car on the way back, the 104 heading west, the October light going flat and gray over the Northumberland Strait. I told her everything, every word I could remember. I spoke slowly and without crying, which surprised me, and Gwen listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did they say anything about a will specifically?" My daughter told him I don't have one, that I've been meaning to. And is that true? Yes, I said. Unfortunately. Gwen was quiet again. Then, my brother-in-law is an estates lawyer in Truro. I know. I'm going to call him Monday morning. Gwen, I'm going to call him, she said again. And her voice was steady and certain, the way it had been when she sat with me in the hospital parking lot 7 years ago and told me that I was going to get through my husband's surgery 1 hour at a time. And you're going to meet with him. And we're going to make sure that whatever you have built over 63 years of your life goes exactly where you decide it goes. I looked out the window at the passing trees. They still had some color left, orange and rust, and that particular yellow that only happens in Nova Scotia in October, the one that always made me feel like the world was trying its best. I feel stupid, I said. Don't. I should have seen. You were her mother at her graduation, Gwen said. You were exactly where you were supposed to be, doing exactly what a mother does. Don't make that into a failure. I didn't say anything for a while. She told him I don't have a will, I said eventually. She asked me about it 2 months ago. I thought she was being thoughtful. I know, Gwen said. She planned it. She planned asking me. I know. The trees went past. The light kept fading. She's still my daughter, I said. Whatever she did, she's still my daughter, I said. Whatever she did, she's still my daughter. Gwen didn't respond to that. She didn't need to. I met with Gwen's brother-in-law. His name is Robert. He works out of a small office on Prince Street in Truro. Law books stacked everywhere, and a window that looks out over someone's back garden. On the following Wednesday, I brought a folder with every account statement I'd been able to locate over the weekend. The RRSP, the TFSA, the house documents, the small lira I'd kept from my last employer, the joint account I'd never bothered to separate after my husband died. Robert listened to everything first. He's that kind of lawyer. He let me speak for almost 20 minutes without taking notes, just listening with his hands folded on the desk. And when I finished, he said, "All right, here's what we're going to do." He explained the process. A will, properly drafted. A trust structure he recommended given the size of my estate, modest by some standards, substantial by mine, everything I'd saved and scrimped and set aside since I was 30 years old and newly widowed with a 7-year-old daughter. He explained that I could name Gwen as executor. He explained what happens to RRSPs on death, what the beneficiary designation actually means in practice, how to ensure that my intentions were legally binding and not dependent on anyone's good faith. Your daughter is currently named primary beneficiary on the RRSP, he said. Yes. Do you want to change that? I sat with that for a moment. Not yet, I said. I want to think about it. That's completely reasonable. You have time now. That's what we're going to make sure of. He charged me his standard rate. I left with a draft will to review, 2 forms to sign the following week, and a beneficiary change form I could complete at any time. I drove home alone. Gwen had offered to come, but I'd needed to do that part myself, and I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and looked at the papers. The house was quiet. It's always been quiet since my husband died, but some days I feel it more than others. That day I felt it a great deal. I thought about my daughter at 7 years old, sitting on this same kitchen floor drawing horses on the backs of grocery receipts while I made dinner. I thought about her at 12, furious at me for reasons I could never entirely decipher. I thought about her at 22, the first graduation, the way she had looked for me in the crowd and smiled when she found me, specific and warm, that smile that was just for me. I thought about the way she'd laughed, quietly, in that reception hall. I did not sleep very well that week. I didn't confront her. Not then. I made a decision, and I want to explain it because I think it might sound like cowardice, and it wasn't. I decided to wait and watch. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with before I said a word. I had learned a long time ago, from my own mother actually, who was a sharper and more patient woman than I have ever managed to be, that confrontation without information is just noise. If I went to my daughter that week, raw and wounded, she would deny it or deflect it or reframe it, and I would learn nothing, and I would have used up the only real advantage I had, which was that she didn't know I knew. So I did nothing visible. Invisibly, I was busy. I finished the will with Robert. I updated the beneficiary designations. I won't say exactly how I reorganized them, but I will say that I thought carefully about every person in my life who had shown me what loyalty looks like, and I made decisions accordingly. Gwen had been feeding my cat for 12 years whenever I traveled. She had driven me to every chemo appointment my husband had. She had called me every single day for a month after he died, even when I didn't pick up, just so I would hear her voice on the message and know I was not invisible. I made Gwen the executor of my estate, and I left her something real. Not everything, not the house, not the full RRSP, but something real. Something that said, I saw what you did, and I did not take it for granted. My daughter remained in the will. This was not naivety. I had reasons. 3 months passed. My daughter called every few weeks, regular and pleasant, and I was regular and pleasant back, and I told her almost nothing about the will or Robert or any of it. She mentioned the wedding date once, in passing, a summer date. I said that sounded lovely. The fiancé came for dinner at Christmas. He was charming. He always was. He asked about my retirement timeline and I said I hadn't decided yet, and he nodded and moved on. And I watched him over the rim of my wine glass and thought about that reception hall in October. In January, my daughter came alone for a long weekend. She said she wanted mother-daughter time. We went to the market in Wolfville. We made soup. We watched 2 films. On the second evening after dinner, she put her wine glass down and looked at me in a way she hadn't in years. Direct and uncertain. The way she used to look as a teenager when she'd done something she wasn't sure of. And she said, "Mom, I need to tell you something." I kept my face very still. "I've been thinking about something for a few months," she said. "About the wedding, about Daniel." Daniel. That was his name, which I have not used until now. "What about Daniel?" I said. She was quiet for a moment. She picked up her wine glass and put it down again. "I think he's been seeing someone else," she said. "I'm not sure. I don't have proof. But there's a woman she's texted him twice that I've seen, and when I asked about her, he was very casual in a way that felt rehearsed." I thought about the reception hall. The woman in the gray suit, the hand on his arm. "How long have you suspected?" I said. "Since the graduation, actually." She looked up at me. There was a woman there, at the reception. I noticed them across the room. I told myself I was being paranoid. I set my own glass down. "I was at that graduation," I said carefully. "I know, and I saw him with a woman." She stared at me. "You saw them?" "Near the east entrance." She had her hand on his arm. My daughter was very still for a moment. Then she said, "Why didn't you say anything?" And I thought about how to answer that. I thought about what I had heard under the table and what I had done in the months since, and what I still didn't fully understand about my own daughter, and I said, "I wasn't sure what I had seen. I didn't want to cause you pain over something that might have been nothing. I was waiting." She nodded slowly. She looked down at the table. "I've been awful to you," she said. "In the last few years, I've kept you at a distance, and I know it, and I never quite explained it, and I don't know how to." She stopped. "I was ashamed," she said, "of some choices I made. About the money. There were conversations I had with Daniel that I think I knew were wrong while I was having them. And I didn't stop them, and then I was ashamed of not stopping them. And then it was easier to avoid you." The kitchen was very quiet. "Which conversations?" I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "About your estate," she said. "He was very focused on it. From early on, I told myself it was practical, that he was just being sensible. But I knew." She pressed her lips together. "I knew it wasn't just practical." I didn't say anything. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I have thought about that moment many times since. What I felt was not the clean, uncomplicated relief of being owed an apology and finally receiving it. It was more complicated than that. It was grief, partly, for the years we'd spent at a careful distance. It was anger, still, that hadn't finished burning through me yet. And underneath both of those things, something older. She was 7 years old, sitting on my kitchen floor drawing horses on grocery receipts. And she was also the woman across the table from me who had sat beside a man calculating my RSP balance. And both of those things were true at once, and I had no idea how to hold them. "I know," I said finally. She looked at me. "You know." "I know more than you think," I said. "I don't want to explain everything tonight, but I want you to understand that I am not unprotected. I want you to know that I took care of it." She was quiet for a moment. "The will, among other things." "Good," she said. And I saw something shift in her face, something that might have been relief. "Good. I'm glad." And I believed her. I don't know if that's wisdom or foolishness. I believed her. The engagement ended in February. My daughter called to tell me she was calm. That contained kind of calm that means you've already cried everything out and now you're on the other side of it. She said Daniel had not denied the other woman when she'd asked him directly. She said it had been almost peaceful, in the end, the way some things are when they've already been dying for a while and you simply finally name it. She came home for a weekend in March just to be here. We didn't talk about Daniel very much. We made soup again. We watched films. She slept in her old bedroom, and in the morning she came downstairs in her socks and her old university sweatshirt and sat at the kitchen table while I made coffee, and I thought, there you are. There you finally are. I had a conversation with Robert in the spring about the beneficiary designations, whether I wanted to revise them now that circumstances had changed. I did revise them. Not entirely, and not dramatically. My daughter is still in my will. She will receive the house and a portion of the RRSP. I have conditions, not punitive ones, but real ones, set out in trust terms that Robert explained carefully, that ensure the funds are used in certain ways over time. She knows about them. I told her. She said that was fair. She also knows about Gwen's share. She didn't say very much about it at first. Then she said, Gwen's been a good friend to you. And I said yes. And she said, better than I was for a few years. And I said, yes. And she said, I'm glad she's in there. That mattered to me. I am writing this in October, 1 year after that navy dress and that graduation hall and a phone sliding under a table at exactly the right moment. The leaves are the same color they were then, orange and rust and that particular Nova Scotia yellow. Gwen and I had dinner last week. I told her everything that had happened over the year, the parts she hadn't been present for, the February phone call, the March weekend, the conversations with Robert. She listened the way she always does. Are you all right? She asked when I finished. I think so, I said. I think I'm something. I'm not sure all right is the right word. It takes time. Yes. But you're not unprotected, she said, and she echoed my own words back to me, the ones I'd said to my daughter that January night. No, I said, I'm not unprotected. That is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the whole thing. After a certain point in life, you understand that the real question is not whether people will try to take from you. They will, sometimes, even the ones you love. But whether you have built something sturdy enough to withstand it. Whether you have been paying attention. Whether the people who deserve your trust have been given it, and the people who haven't have been quietly, carefully, without drama, shown what you are actually made of. I had that navy dress dry cleaned. I hung it back in my closet. I'm going to find a good day for it.